Good morning. Good morning.
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 Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. We're giving folks a minute or so to join us, and then we'll jump in.
So I'm going to mute and turn off my camera, but I'm here.
Yes, please. Thank you. Thank you, Elena. Yeah, folks, if you hear background music, if you can mute your thank you. And of course, we mics are open and available to you all to share when there's those opportunities to share, but thank you for staying muted when not. And again, good morning, everyone. So happy to see you back. Give folks a couple of minutes to join. And actually, as you're joining, please feel free to just let us know. I see some folks are already doing that, who you are. And if you want, how you're feeling today. What are you bringing into the space? Feel free to add that. You want to put that in the chat?
At least once a day, so. Then it proceeds to tell me that I'm beautiful. And
Good morning, everyone.
Morning, everyone. Welcome.
It is sunny out.
It is.
Yaimara, nice to see you. Pamela, good morning, Pamela. Good morning, Michaele. And actually, just a reminder, folks, I love to sort of mention folks. So Jareen, Jatna, please feel free to correct me if I'm mispronouncing your name. Good morning, Carmelo.
Sarah, same. I'm also so ready for spring.
Yes. Fingers crossed for an early spring that this can continue. This was a weird winter. A lot of cold.
Cold winter. It was really cold.
No, I'm saying, yeah, I agree. A lot of cold, a lot of snow, but just weird in the sense that like never got that big snow, just a lot of small ones.
Mm.
Good morning, everyone. And just a note, just a reminder that the handouts, and I should just say, I think our team is still the same, except Leslie, who was our host last week, is out this week. So we have Vanessa, the lovely Vanessa, is our host today. So if you have any difficulties or any challenges, please feel free to reach out to CTAC admin, our host, Vanessa. Say hi, Vanessa.
Hi, everyone. Yes, I'm the host for today's session. So yeah, if you do have any questions, any technical questions, please feel free to send me a message.
Vanessa will put in to the chat, a link to the chat, the handouts. I know we shared them with you all last week, but just in case anyone needs them or you want them handy, the handouts are available in the chat. Okay. All right. Jackie, we're at 1:05. We good to start?
Let's start. Yeah, let's get started.
So there may be others who join us. Again, thank you all for joining us for week 2 of our STARS training. We're so happy to have you back, and we're so excited. Last week was, I thought, a very strong start to the training, and just a little quick reminder that last week we went through quite a bit. I want to say we totally appreciated the level of engagement, the interest, and things. We thought things ran pretty smoothly, but please, let us know if there were any concerns last week. Just really quick in terms of an overview for folks. Last week, we did a lot of work around sort of developing or thinking about that trauma-informed lens. We talked about strengths and identifying strengths. We talked about trauma-responsive communication, and we're going to be talking a lot more about that this week. We talked about judgment and ways in which you can kind of think about and develop the self-awareness to sort of be mindful of your judgments, but also this week we're going to talk a little bit about what you can do about that as well. But the importance of self-awareness. Please, feel free to also chat in as I'm going through these topics. Any topics that stood out for you all from last week that you just remember, and or if anyone wants to chat in a moment in which something that we talked about last week was actually used during the week. So we'd love to hear about that as well. But these are some of the things that we covered last week. And Jackie, fill in the blanks. Anything I'm missing?
No, I think that we're good. Yeah, I'd love to hear in the chat if anyone has anything that's sort of sat with them since the last session. And yeah, I think we'd love to hear sort of what has been percolating for folks, I guess, in the last week. You can also unmute if there's
Please feel free. And again, though, we very much appreciated folks' participation last week and engagement. Brenda, I see you unmuted. Did you have something you wanted to share?
No.
Oh, okay, no problems. Okay. And again, if anyone we're keeping track of the people's little boxes as well as the chat. So if you want to share something, raise a hand or unmute yourself and let us know. But just a quick reminder about. Well, here we go. Yeah. Sorry, folks. Give me a second. I need to practice patience. Okay. There we go. I'm sorry, folks. Little quirky with the advancing slides here. But just a reminder of our agreements. I thought we did pretty well with our agreements in terms of folks being on camera when they could. Please, whenever possible, be on camera. Stay muted. When you're not speaking, please feel free to unmute yourself. Try to minimize distractions. I know it's really hard. One of the things about virtual training is it could be so hard to minimize those distractions when your email is on the same screen as your training. And other things like that. Please, and one of the things we really appreciated is folks using the chat, raising your hands and reactions. Which also tells us that folks are there and with us and engaged in the conversation, being curious about discomfort, and all the other ways, assuming positive intent.
We have expressed to her your concerns. We have expressed.
Thank you. And making space and taking space. So folks, allowing the conversation to go, as I mentioned, and again, share liberally with others. We're going to have a couple of more breakout rooms today. So we hope that folks in those breakout rooms will have an opportunity to share their perspectives. So those are the few things. Again, if anyone has any concerns about our keeping to these norms, please let us know. Thank you, Susan. So Susan says, I appreciated the shift to viewing strengths, which I try to do anyway, but our documentation is often so focused on the problems, so focusing on and feeling open to talk about strengths is a great feeling. Thanks for sharing that, Susan. And it's interesting that you say that, Susan, because I think some of the times when we think about the trauma-informed lens and an idea of a strength-based model that focuses not on what's wrong with you, but what happened to you, we're actually going to be talking a lot about that today. And it actually does flow. I appreciate you saying that, because it does flow. Sometimes even our paperwork, what we're asked to report on, almost by definition asks you to focus on the problem, right? You have to document medical necessity. So you have to document the problems and the challenges and difficulties and all of that. And of course, what you're doing to address them. So there are things that are built into our systems that can make it really difficult to focus on strengths. So just a little reminder about our STARS skills. So again, these are the areas that we're working in. Trauma responsive communication skills. Again, we're going to continue to talk about that today. We're also going to talk about sharing information, ways in which you can effectively use information to help folks connect the dots, the people that you serve connect the dots between their own experiences and their past experiences and their current experiences and what's going on in their lives. And then of course, in next week, we'll be covering more regulation, simple regulation strategies, how to help connect people to the supports they need, and then sustaining the work. How do you all sort of maintain your compassion, resilience in the work that you do? So these are topics to come, but as I said, today we're going to finish off talking about trauma responsive communication skills, and we're going to start a little bit on sharing information. And then this is a little bit of a repeat, but last week when we started talking about trauma responsive communication skills, we talked about the importance of maintaining self-awareness and taking a non-judgmental stance. And just to be clear, as we mentioned last week, we've done a lot of trainings where we talk to folks and we say to folks, for example, be non-judgmental, practice empathy, all those kinds of things. In this training, what we're trying to do is define those things. So what does it mean to be non-judgmental? And oftentimes last week we spent a little time talking about judgment and how you can identify it and how you can be aware of it yourself and what you can do to address it. And then in addition to that, and this is where we're going to be moving into this week, we're going to talk a little bit more about curiosity, expressing curiosity, conveying accurate empathy, and providing validation. So we're going to go a little bit deeper on all of these topics this week. And so, as I mentioned, we're going to start off with expressing curiosity. So just a reminder, when we think about two things about curiosity, as I said, that self-awareness piece, to some degree, it's curiosity about yourself, right? What's coming up for you? So as we talked about last week, what can be really difficult in this work is when you're working with someone who is highly dysregulated, who's experienced a lot of trauma, who might have a lot of difficulties relating and connecting to others, because that's what trauma can do to folks. It can be really difficult. So in part, last week you talked a little bit about being curious about yourself, self-awareness. Getting in touch with yourself. What is the person that you're working with bringing up in you? What are the feelings that are coming up for you? And catching yourself to some degree. But also, of course, there's curiosity with the people we serve. So some of these are very basic, right? We talk about seeking elaboration. As just a reminder, as we said last week, when we think about the skills that we have integrated throughout this training, we rely a lot on motivational interviewing principles. So, of course, seeking elaboration, tell me more about that. Tell me more about your experience of that. Intentional open-ended questions. What feelings came up for you at that time? Exploring when folks are sharing about their experiences. What came up for you at time? What was happening? What was going through your mind in that moment? So getting an understanding, and that can be related to experiences that the person sharing that were highly distressing or difficult. And of course, that can also work for any kind of experiences along the spectrum of experiences that someone can have. Both positive experiences as well. And then checking in to ensure that you understand the other person's perspective, right? So summarizing, being able to reflect that, and ensuring that you got it right or checking in with them for understanding. So these are some basic ways in which we can express curiosity with the folks that we serve to deepen our understanding. So, remember the mantra of trauma-informed care is moving from what's wrong with you to what happened to you. These are just various ways of asking what happened, what was going on for you in that moment. And so those are just some simple ways. And then these are also ways we can be curious about a lot of things. We can be curious about difficult, stressful events that have gone on. Certainly, of course, about traumatic events that may have gone in a person's life to better understand how that trauma impacted them. But then we can also express curiosity about their strengths, right? Can you tell me about some ways you've gotten through difficult times in your life? How have these ways of coping helped you sort of better understanding how they've addressed their distress? And what are some strengths that you have or connections to people that you have that have helped you heal and recover from trauma and adversity in your life? Again, we have these in quotes. We don't expect these to be scripted or used exactly in these words, but these are just a few simple ways of exploring strengths. That last one, as we think about strengths, right, is based on a lot of the research we know on resilience, right? The research on resilience says in a lot of ways that resilience is built through relationships with others. And sometimes exploring what relationships have helped the person heal and recover and or have helped them feel supported at various moments in their lives becomes really critical. So you're trying to get a full sense of all the different ways. It's funny, I was talking to a person the other day, a person that I'm working with the other day, and um, and it was so interesting because she was very much talking about some highly traumatic events that took place in her life, and I was trying to better understand. But I asked her some of these questions, and as she was saying, she really focused a lot on who helped her and what helped her through, and the people uh, uh, who helped her through her journey. It was someone sharing about her immigration story and the folks that were there for her through that immigration story. But then I also asked her about her own characteristics, but she had a really hard time. She was able to talk about all the folks who helped her on her journey that were for sure were strengths. But also, what were the characteristics that she shared? And it was almost a little difficult for her to sort of connect to those, but we got to some of them that she said. But certainly, her drive, her perseverance, all of those things that just kept her moving. And I should also mention, as we talked about last week, she relied a lot on her faith. She was a very sort of had a strong sense of faith, and her belief in God kept her moving. So she talked a little about her personal strengths as well. But these are all different ways of exploring strengths. So again, that's just a little bit of setting the ground. I'm going to hand it over to Jackie because we have a little bit of practice exercise on conveying accurate empathy. Wait, Jackie, am I wrong? Oh, no, I'm sorry. Sorry. So I'm sorry, this is me still. So, so expressing curiosity is one thing, right? And the important sort of connecting the dots here is conveying curiosity and being curious is also, for me, a way that allows you to practice empathy, right? Because as you're getting curious and listening to the stories are always going to be the reflections on people's experiences are always going to be laden with feelings, sometimes stated feelings, and sometimes just told in ways where feelings are certainly coming through. So conveying accurate empathy then becomes so critical, right? As you're getting the story and understanding the story, you want to be able to sort of connect to and reflect back what you're seeing. And what can be so powerful is that as the person is telling their story and you're being curious, you're also integrating opportunities for demonstrating empathy, connecting to folks' experiences, their feelings. So, and this really allows you to deepen your relationship. When the person feels like you get it, that you understand them. So as we talk about empathy, it involves both ways of being, but also specific action. So it is that, sort of deep interest in listening to their story, deep interest in wanting to hear the story and being genuine with them. And then some specific actions you can take, many forms, right? Of course, again, this is for folks who are familiar with motivational interviewing techniques, reflecting the emotional content of what is being said, not just the words, but also what the emotions and meaning underneath, connecting to various parts of the client's experience to help them make meaning out of it. And again, we're going to talk a little bit more about what that looks like. Identifying themes and patterns, right, in their responses and their experiences and how they've coped. And that identifying themes and patterns can be really powerful. As we talked about last week, I think we touched on this. Sometimes with some of the folks that we work with, it is difficult for them to identify their own strengths.
I'm not gonna
Sometimes
fight them on that.
they're not
Mhm.
aware of their own strengths. As I said, the person I was talking to the other day had a little bit of a hard time sharing them. It took a little while to get there. But if you're also looking at themes and patterns of their response, it gives you opportunities to also identify the strengths that can be there that others might not see. Um, and these can also be, just a reminder, can also be phrased as, again, reflections, but they're also hypotheses. Some folks kind of push back a little bit on the idea of accurate empathy. Like, you can't always be 100% right. But a lot of times we can be right. If we hit it right, we can really help to connect with folks. But if we're wrong, it's okay. The person will, um, based on the trust that you're developing with them, will correct you, right? So even if you're off on, you say, for example, it sounds like you were really sad. No, I wasn't sad. I was really mad. It is okay, because that just creates the space to deepen your relationship with folks. So, uh, and these are just, again, a few different ways in which we can express accurate. I noticed your fists are clenched pretty tightly, like you might be angry, right? Just noticing the body language, noticing how a person is responding. You've mentioned a few times, right? Patterns, right? That we talked about. I just finished talking. You've mentioned a few times that you feel like you're not doing enough to help out at home. It makes me wonder where you might be getting that message from, right? So just seeing the patterns in what someone is saying. And I hear that family is very important to you. Yet I also hear you expressing some anxiety around spending more time with your dad. So oftentimes reflecting the ambivalence, reflecting two sides that someone might be expressing. So being able to touch in and connect to someone's ambivalence and someone's confusion, which, again, as human beings, we are very complicated, and situations that are presented in our lives can be very complicated and complex. So part is trying to sort of help folks understand that complexity. So that's just a little bit of grounding on a couple of things: expressing curiosity, being curious, conveying accurate empathy. I'm looking at the chat here. We're going to transition to a little practice exercise in a moment, but Jennifer says, great prompts. I am consciously trying to incorporate recognition and reflection of post-traumatic growth in my personal life and clinical practice. Yeah, and yes. And I think part of that idea of post-traumatic growth, right? How folks are able to integrate their stressful, traumatic, often toxic experiences into who they are. The I- the only way, maybe that's a little too extreme, but certainly one of the most powerful ways is listening to the story that helps you sort of see their growth in their lives. But and then Susan says, when interfacing with a person who caused harm in their intimate partner relationships where a strong power and control dynamic is present, please share how you can use these techniques while holding the person who caused harm accountable for their actions that are harming their children and family functioning. That is a great question, Susan. I'm gonna punt that because in some ways, right, developing a relationship with someone, I'm gonna punt that a little bit. Later on, we're gonna be talking about validation, right? And I think one of the things that we're going to talk about when we do talk about validation, and certainly this is an area where others who may have some thoughts about this, please feel free to share. But one of the things that we talk about validation is it is perfectly okay at times to, a lot of times, to validate persons' emotions and their perspective and their thoughts, right? And again, just a reminder, validating feelings and thoughts does not mean condoning or approving of them. But one of the things we're going to talk about is the concern about validating behavior, right? Because sometimes that could be either tricky or reinforcing to folks. So we're going to talk a little bit about how do you balance balancing and be careful about validating behaviors that might be unhealthy, risky, or in this case, harmful to others. And we're going to talk a little bit about ways in which you can sort of integrate the movement towards changing behavior, right, with folks in trauma-informed ways. So thank you for that question, Susan. We're gonna, like I said, and if that doesn't answer your question when we talk about validation later, we can certainly have more of a discussion of that. Jennifer says using
Jim.
yeah.
Can I
Excuse
make a comment real quick, just to
Absolutely.
interrupt?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never heard the term conveying accurate empathy, but I think that's what a lot of us as clinicians or budding clinicians already do when, like, reflecting back on what people are saying, asking questions kind of to confirm that the patient or client is feeling a certain way, and then repeating and saying what you're here to kind of validate in a positive way. So yeah, thank you for that definition.
Oh, and thank you for that feedback, Usuri. Yeah. And I'm also, like I said, I'm glad you also raised that, because again, that accurate part, sometimes people, sort of feel like they have to get it right. And it's trying to be as accurate as possible and working towards that. But thank you. And then Jennifer says using I statements is very important because it adds to empathy and takes away any attacks or blame. Yeah, and Jennifer, if you can clarify using I statements as a provider, or sort of helping folks to develop the ability to do I statements or to use I statements. I was just curious.
Oh yeah. Usually like for me, since I especially like work with kids and teens, so the I statement of like my notices, like I've noticed, I've seen, I can tell like from my perspective, so that they could see that they're like being validated, they're being seen, and we're not putting like a blame shift, especially at the school that I work with. A lot of the times, like for behaviors about the teachers, like you're just doing this, you're just doing that, what causes a lot of tension.
Yeah.
So when we use I statements, we're conveying an empathy instead of just putting just blame. But then eventually we can get to those behaviors, but we have to make sure that they're being seen and heard. So yeah.
Great. Yeah. And I really appreciate you saying it too. I have to tell you, Jennifer, one of my pet peeves, and I've observed a lot of children in classrooms as part of my work. And it is so difficult for me to watch sometimes when I see the child that I'm observing doing everything right, following the rules, and as can oftentimes happen, right? The child that I'm observing is usually a child who is having difficulties, but I can see them do, 7, 8, 10 things right. And then as soon as they do something that's off, nobody says anything. Nobody says anything. And then all of a sudden, when the child does something that breaks a rule or goes off the script or is not following directions, everyone is noticing them. And I kind of hear that in what you're saying, right? I see you. I really appreciate you. So there's an element of that, not just I statements, but also kind of reinforcing how we use that to reinforce people's, thoughts, feelings, and behavior, to validate them. Yeah. Okay.
I also wanted to jump in, Jim, because I work with a lot of parents, and I think that often also, like, I don't know about you all, but often, if you get often the identified patient, identified client is the child, and so we get a parent in, and there's something that maybe we want, they've been criticized a lot, right? When a parent comes in, they're often feeling a lot of shame, maybe because, they feel like they failed as a parent. And I think oftentimes getting at that internal drive that sort of like, this is what you want to be a good parent, right? And identifying those things. And it's, we're going to talk about validation and about, again, how you can sort of validate things without necessarily condoning, because we also see parents that sometimes are doing things that, we might feel like are not like the right way, given what their kid is going through. But I think when we can really see them and see how much they care about their child, see how much they're maybe over controlling is rooted in anxiety, or the fact that they're so hurt by their child is because they care so much, or whatever it is, we can reflect that back to them. That is also what helps to sort of strengthen that relationship, so that we can then help them later, down the line, with whatever the sort of behavioral shift is that they need to make, or that they want to make.
I think it's also like a really complicated parent-child dynamic, right? Like, I mean, it's never black and white, and things are always fluctuating and like
Absolutely.
situational. So like, I don't know, I can't think of an example, but like, it's kind of like, a child is not always right, and a parent always sometimes has a right to be angry at them and
Yeah.
need to kind of like set boundaries and rules. And
Absolutely.
then a parent can't always be like frustrated and express furiousness or like frustrations, right? Like that's not always the right way to go, despite the context that they may be coming from. It's still like kind of like you have to show care for the child, right? So there's like different times you do different things. I don't know if I'm making sense in what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely.
It's always like based on context, I think.
For sure. I think
Things
that
are always changing.
right,
You're-
you wouldn't necessarily apply this to every single situation. I think, I'm obviously talking in sort of large swaths here. I think it's just sort of something to keep in mind, that like there are situations in which we might be, it's sort of combining sort of the judgment that we sometimes internally feel, thinking about the judgment that that parent is feeling potentially about themselves. And then, so, as an example, like this can be helpful to get in touch with both in terms of ourselves as the therapist, but also for the parent, helping them to feel seen, I think, is sort of what I was getting at. But I do think you're right. Always it's going to be on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah. I always like to say that, as helpers, again, regardless of who, therapist, case manager, clinician, peer, whatever it is, like we should all be in that gray space, in that gray area, because yeah, these things are often not, understanding a parent's experience can be so critical. And actually, just as a little preview, we're going to have a little demonstration later about some of this with a parent that we have a video of that will be using as part of this training. So with that said, thank you all for sharing. And if there, please keep sharing in the chat if you want, or raising a hand and unmuting yourself. So we do have our first practice coming up. Jackie, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah. So we'll get to apply this into a specific situation. So we're going to break you all out into groups, and you all should have the handouts so we're going to it is, I believe, the third activity in the handout. So let me double check.
And Vanessa put the handouts again for anyone who might still need them. She put them in the chat, so if you need access to the handouts, they're there.
And it looks like something happened with my screen. Hold on. I'm going to stop sharing for just a second. But Jim, could you check in the handouts and see what page number it is for people, please?
Yes, absolutely. Hold on.
Or I can check. Okay, so it's it's page 4. Great.
No, I think it's page 3. I think it's page 3. Practice activity 2. Oh, no, sorry, Jackie. You're
Am I
right.
still there? Sorry.
Yep,
Okay.
I'm sorry,
So
Jackie,
it's
you're right.
page
It's on
4.
page 4. Activity 3, practice activity 3. All right.
Yes.
So yeah, sorry about that, Jack.
Sorry, my screen is kind of freezing. Jim, are you?
Yeah, no, I can sort of help folks get in there. So in the practice activity, it's page 4, and essentially as actually, let me go here and um,
Okay, sorry. It's page 4 and page 5. So, if you, I think we did this last time, but if you are going to, when you go into your room, you should see a number come up. And if you are in an even room, you will be going and you'll be using the page 4. If you're in an odd room, you'll be using page 5. If you're not sure, just pick one. And you'll be thinking about 3 to 4 statements or questions that you could convey if you were in a session with this person and that convey accurate empathy and curiosity. Are any questions that, thank you, Jetna. Anything that, any
I don't
questions
see
that folks have?
page numbers on the sheets. It just, I see activity
Right, so it should say practice.
5, activity 3, group A, and activity 3, group
Right.
B.
Right, so it'll say, yes, I was just saying it's the 4th page on the document. So it is, but it's practice activity 3, yes, either group A or group B. And it's
So
on page,
group A is the even groups and
Yes, so
group
the-
B is the
yes.
odd groups?
yes,
Okay. The even numbers in our group?
yeah.
yes, thank you, thanks for clarifying, Yusuri.
Mhm.
Other questions? Looks like someone, if folks are having issues accessing the handouts, hopefully one person in your group will be able to have them, and we ask you to read them aloud. So it should still be, you should still be able to do the activity. Just a reminder that if you could make sure that you have access to a mic and a camera when you're in the room, so that you can participate. Other questions before we break out?
Well, actually, one other reminder, Jack, if you're having any difficulties, so if there's no one in the room with the handout, or there's other folks, or you're having any kind of difficulties, just a reminder that if you can send one person out into the main room and come back out and go back in, but if we'll be here, if you need any help in the breakout room, just come to the main room and we'll help you out and join you in that group.
Do you want to send the link to us in the breakout rooms too, just in case anyone doesn't have it?
The link to the
To the readings.
we just added so we just put it in the chat again.
Okay.
So we I believe it's there. Vanessa added the link, and then she also actually uploaded the document as well. So if people want to download the document as well, they can do
Cool. Thank you.
that.
All right. Oh yeah, there you go. That last one is a little bit easier to download as well. Okay.
Great. Okay. If folks don't have any other questions, we can send folks out.
Okay, sounds great. And just confirming 15 minutes.
Let's yeah, we'll check in with well, actually, why don't we do 12 minutes, and then we can we'll bring them back after that.
Okay, perfect.
Thanks, Vanessa. Jennifer, Nadine, I'm wondering if you, oh, hi Nadine. We just went into breakout rooms. I'm wondering, did you see something pop up? Oh,
Yeah.
great. Okay.
Oh, sorry. When did I do that? Yeah, I think we might want to cut this down to 10 minutes. What did
Well,
you say? 10 to 12?
I just said 12.
Okay, we're good. We're a little behind, but
Yeah.
actually, okay, that works out well. Yeah, so I think once we folks come back, we'll process it and give a break.
Yeah.
I'm going to step away just for a tiny bit. I just have to call Silver really quickly, so it shouldn't take too long.
Everything okay?
Yeah, no, they just sent me an email to call them, so I'm just gonna step away really quick.
Okay. Um,
I think part of the issue with the slide control is the slide transitions. I think we
Yeah.
should not.
oh no, that would
I
be,
think we
yeah,
should
I
not.
agree. Because yeah, I hit and it's
No,
like,
I don't know how those got in there because I
Yeah.
did not put those in there.
me either.
So I'm
You
wondering.
keep freezing. Yes, you're in slow motion, Jackie.
I know. I don't know what else to. I don't know what to do about it because I don't know. My internet says it's fine.
Yeah. Well, and again, I go back, if you want, I can certainly, I don't know if it reduces your bandwidth any if you're not sharing.
I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I'm guessing
But-
what happened is that when you uploaded the slides, there was some sort of setting maybe in PowerPoint that got transferred or somehow something happened with Google
It
Slides.
could be. But yeah, it's like a,
Not your
few
setting, but I
second
just meant
delay.
like the.
Well,
the-
I'm learning also just to click once and just give it about 5 seconds because that's about what's happening.
Yeah.
But I keep clicking it and then you see advanced like 3 or 4 slides. We're good though. We're good. All right. So we're doing pretty good on time. And I definitely want to make sure. Yeah, Jackie, we might. We'll see. But if we think that when we get to common concerns, what do you think about doing that as a large group and having folks either chat it?
I'd rather skip the last activity, but it's up to you. Or not skip the last activity, but push it to. Actually, I don't know. It's up to you.
Hmm.
Trying to quit all my applications to see if that helps.
Okay.
If it's like still glitchy, you might probably just need to go off camera, maybe see if that helps. Because you know how it is sometimes with Zoom cameras, it can take up a lot of the connection.
All right, Jackie. So no, we'll go as is. We'll go as is. I think what we can do. So
I just feel like
yeah.
people don't. It's too big of a group, and or whatever has happened in terms of like the vibe in here. I just feel like people are not talking as much in the big group, and so I just feel like people aren't gonna.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
It's just not gonna. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong.
No, I'm
but-
with you, yeah. So I think, we did practice activity 1 and 2. No, I'm sorry. Okay, so, no, that's fine. Let's keep it as a breakout. And I might suggest that, no, let's leave it as is. I was gonna say that we could assign a different problem or just have folks pick one of those barriers
Oh.
that one of those challenges.
Said so that's what I was saying when we were prepping.
Right,
I was saying,
right, okay, yeah,
so I said we asked folks to pick 2 to address.
okay, sounds good.
God, why is this so annoying? Mm,
How much time
Okay.
do we have left?
We have 2 minutes and 30 seconds left.
Okay,
Hey, everybody, I am John Hodgen.
what was that?
It's me going through all of my windows and trying to close them so that everything that I stop lagging.
I
Gotcha.
thought that was someone else. I was like, wait. Hi,
No.
Eugene.
I'll be right back, folks.
Did you have a issue joining? Oh, okay, never mind. Okay. I guess they didn't.
Maybe he left the group too early.
Okay, I think I've figured it out. Okay, I think that that's better.
Yeah, it's much more smoother.
Oh my God. I think it was, I don't know what it was, but there was some application that I just was like causing issues.
Okay,
Okay,
are we good to bring folks back?
we have a minute left.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want to bring them back early or do you want to
No,
just?
no, we're good. I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, it's fine. You can see in the top corner how much time we have left. There's a little
Gotcha.
timer. Vanessa, thank you so much for taking care of those things.
Yeah.
Do you, when that happens, what do? Do you just send them you can't just send them the basic Zoom link, right?
No, the thing is they were on a wait list. So it's like I had to manually sort of register them. So it
Okay.
was like a bit of like, yeah.
Okay.
Mm.
So
yeah.
I'm gonna close the breakout rooms. Is that okay?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll put
Great. Oh well.
Time ran out so quickly.
I know. Time goes by so fast. Welcome back.
How are you?
I'd love to hear from some folks how this went.
Oh, good. You feel better?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. So,
I can start if
yeah,
people don't mind, unless someone else wants to go first.
no, go ahead.
So we talked about situation B. I forgot the name of the student, but it was a high school boy who has a really hard time with finding interest in school and only has one English teacher that he likes, but otherwise finds classes all boring. So we came up with a bunch of questions that we would ask him to convey accurate empathy. And they include, why are you so tired all of the time? So because he said he was kind of tired, so you want to try to understand why he's tired, to kind of let him express what's going on in his life, maybe in school or outside of school. What can we help you learn? Since he's bored, what are you interested in? What do you want to do after you graduate from high school? You know, so we can try to figure out what it is that we can direct him towards in terms of academic or non-academic learning. What do you like about your English teacher, right? Because I think Susan said, you know, has this kind of favorite teacher. So what is it that attracts you to the English teacher? What is it that, you know, that you learn from her, or that, you know, she cares about you or something like that? What is it that you like about your English teacher, so that we can find more connectors with him, with other peers and other adults in the school? What can we do to help you learn so that your mind doesn't go blank? Because I think he said something about hating learning or not being able to learn and his mind going blank. So maybe he has some special needs that were kind of overlooked. So what is it that we can help you, you know, figure out what your learning styles are? And then reflecting back, even though school is difficult, it seems like it matters to you. You know, I think someone said that. Even though school is difficult, it really seems like it matters to you. You care about it. And that's really great. I forget what line it was that he said that expressed that it mattered. But and then we kind of discussed a little bit that it's different. There was a question about how would this go differently in real life, even though we have all these awesome questions set up. Some possibilities was that the child might not want to engage at all, right? They're a teenager, they might be a sullen teenager, they might not want to say anything and engage in the conversation and just kind of want to be too cool for school. Or else they might push back and say, hey, this is my life. This is my world. You know, I ain't got to say anything about it. This is just the way it is. And, you know, stop trying to help me. So there's, you know, I'm sure there are other people have other possibilities too about how it would be different in real life, but this is some of the stuff that we came up with in our group, the four of us. I think it was Susan, Shirley, and Sonia, and me, Suri.
Thank you. Thank you so
No
much for sharing. I would love to hear that. Those are all some really great, both questions and also statements. I love in particular, the one about, you know, sounds like school's hard, and that, you know, clearly it matters to you, right? If it was hard and that wasn't upsetting, like, you know, that would indicate that it wasn't really that important to you, but clearly it's important to you. I really love that. Anyone else want to share what came up for them in their groups?
Hi, it's Jennifer. I'll share. I think what was so interesting, and this really is like the flow from the first session of STARS to now, was the importance of being grounded and being connected before working with the case. So for our group, we kind of like, at first we're going to jump in and we read the vignette, but then all of a sudden there was like a step back, and there was introductions to each group member, and people actually had shares of just sort of like the stressors are kind of coming up for them a little bit. And I think just having that support, we then reread the vignette again, and it was sort of a different attunement. So I thought that was just really interesting. And again, really emphasizing the importance of being in a good space, or, you know, allowing oneself that time to then enter into the work.
I really love that. I really love it. Thank you so much for sharing that. I feel that I really think that is such a valuable thing, is that sometimes even just like when you're in an activity, right, how you approach a case, how you approach someone really says so much, not only about what's going on with that client, but what's going on with us. And so, you know, when we're bringing our own stress, our own, you know, mood, our own whatever it is to that, you know. And I also think it really speaks to the power of connection, and how healing it can be in terms of managing all those things, right? You know, especially in a setting like this where people are doing similar work to the work that we're doing, you know, you can talk to your family, you can talk to friends, you can talk to professionals, and also talking to colleagues has a special, something's really special there. You know, you all get each other. I think we all get each other in a way that, you know, sometimes folks who are not in this field or who don't do this work, sometimes, you know, it can be harder.
Yeah.
And so thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's,
and I think also for, I think, really practicing something we discussed last week, right? Which is what's going on with you. What does this situation scenario bring up for you? And kind of grounding yourself first. So no favorites here, but you get a couple of extra stars for doing that, which is kind of integrating something we talked about last week. Just kidding about that. But yeah, it's really wonderful to take that step back and say, what's going on in this scenario and what does it bring up for us? Great.
Ayana.
I want to add to that if I could.
Yeah.
I was in that group, and I have to say the validation of presence, that we connected and validated that each of us was present there as a person, not just as this therapist or just as a member of a group.
Yeah.
And it really did help to enter in to then focus on the client. And I think that there is a lot of neglect on the part of the therapist and who that person is and what they're going through, so that it's harder for us to metabolize out everything that happens during the day. And I really want to thank the people that were in my group. It was very validating, because I often feel very alone and unseen. And I can't depend on my clients to meet those needs.
Right.
And so it was very
That's,
helpful for me to be in this group.
Thank you, Deborah. And by the way, as we talked about the last area we're going to be talking about, we're going to be dedicating next week is that part around self-care, but what we like to call compassion resilience, right? That ability
Yep.
to feel connected. And when you can do that, it's a wonderful gift to be able to bring folks together and have them all think about a situation, a scenario, a client, a person that you're serving, and all come together to think about what does it take to sort of help this person and approach this work. Yeah.
Ayana,
Oh,
sorry.
sorry.
Ayana, you had your.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah, Ayana, go first. Go ahead.
Yeah. Thanks, Susuri. Ayana, please.
Hi guys. Just to piggyback over what Deborah said, Deborah, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. That's definitely important to keep the separation from everything that they said, because after our group read it was overwhelming, does kind of knocks you out for a minute, and to just get back into a compassion mode where you have your personal empathy and your professional skills and knowledge and wisdom to put at play here, because a lot of the stuff was very heavy. But one of the things our group came up with was asking the question, what happened to make you feel? Specifically, the client said they felt like a turtle, they felt raw. So what happened that made you feel like a turtle without a shell? Have you ever felt like that before? Just having little, taking points out of what they said, follow-up questions. If you think a shell would be helpful, what would having a shell do for you now at this moment? You know what I'm saying? Or with this current situation, since that's the way she expressed feeling. One of the things that we did, we chose when it asked like what responses the group reflected on, we chose a place to validate Carrie's strengths. Sorry, I was trying to remember her name. A place to validate Carrie's strengths based on her ability to cope in the past, the coping skills that she already developed and utilized previously. She said certain things, so we were like, curious on that end as far as what strengths and things she already has that can hopefully navigate her in this crisis moment, that she can help deal with the things she's dealing with now. And just to say another thing we decided to say was that she made a point to discuss that she used to kill her. She had threatened to kill herself and harm herself and scratch her arms. And she said, I don't do that anymore. So we made a point to acknowledge that. We're glad that to hear that you no longer do that anymore. And to also follow it, like what changed? What made you stop that behavior and those thoughts? Like you said, we don't validate the behavior, but we validate the fact that she did have those suicidal ideations, she did have those thoughts, and she no longer has them anymore. And she acknowledged that.
Love that. Yeah, really highlighting the growth or the change, the work that she has done, both to sort of, provide that validation, but also to provide a lot of hope, right? You've done so much work. And you might feel like there's more work to be done, and you clearly have the capability to do this kind of work, right?
Well, yeah. And right, the other part is, what did you do, right? Like, what changed, right? Yeah. So it's great because you're also getting at, like, what did she do to get there? And I think that's a great way of also sort of figuring out what has she tried. The other thing I just want to point out, metaphors, right? Their use of metaphors, and then I think sometimes we can use metaphors, but yeah, when you have someone sharing a metaphor, like it feels like this, deepening that, because that gets at meaning, right? Metaphors are just a way where people express the meaning that a situation brings to them. So I really appreciate you focusing and getting in there and saying, like, exploring that metaphor that was used. Yeah, metaphors are always wonderful. They're also a great tool we can use when we see patterns in behavior, and we're like, it's whatever, it must feel like you're on a roller coaster or on a tightrope, whatever it is.
It makes it colorful, like they're painting the picture, so you can get a little bit more into what they're
And it
Yep.
helps them to expand that frame of how they're thinking about things, right? We can think about things that, there are other things in this world that are like that, and maybe that expands how I think about it. Susan, I see you have your hand up, but Suri, I know that I cut you off before, so I want to make sure that I give you a chance.
Thank you. No, I just wanted to first say, like, Ayana, everything was spot on about what you said in terms of like, covering all bases and asking the right questions and validating people. So that was really great. And I think it relates to what I wanted to say before was that, like, having worked with students for a long time before I became a social worker. And I didn't read the reading that Ayana that you read, so I don't know if it was within a school context or it was just a parental context or something. Okay. So in the reading I did, it was in a school context. So I was like, I was able to come up with questions for the kid like pretty easily because I don't even see it as like a teacher, student, or client, patient relationship. I see it as kind of like human to human. You try to empathize with them and you try to figure out what's going on in their lives and in their minds. And you ask them questions to kind of excavate that and help them come to realizations themselves about what they're feeling, because sometimes it's internalized and you don't necessarily understand what's going on in your own thoughts until someone talks to you about it. And then you're like, oh, wow, I was feeling that way,
Yeah, that's that process of helping folks get to their own self-exploration and understanding the meaning in their lives. Susan,
Yes, sorry,
Susan,
and
then we'll need to move on. I know we haven't gotten everyone's thoughts, but Susan, we'll give you the last thought on this, and then we're gonna move on from here.
Just going back to the statement, I used to always want to kill myself, but I don't do that anymore. Curiosity. How did you get there? We already said that, but it sounded as if that person got there to that point by themselves, which is a strength. Right. Or if it's not, your curiosity to find out who are the strengths that help us get to that point, so that you can then begin to incorporate a safety plan. Sorry, suicide and safety plans are important.
But no, absolutely, Susan, and I appreciate that. And the only reframe I would make is just a reminder, as I said before, sometimes the strengths do come from others, right? Like other people have contributed to.
But we also and that's why I'm saying I would want to be curious, because
no, absolutely.
Because it sounds as if she did it on her own, but she may have had strengths around her, which could be supports that could be used later on.
And the only point I'm trying to make is that sometimes, right, it's a two-way street, right? So what we know that helps build resilience, like I said, is the help of others, people who contribute, who have our backs, who help us learn and grow, right? But also that's the strength of an individual, right? Because we all know, right? People can be there to help you, but if you're not willing to open yourself up and take that, so that's a strength too, accepting help, being able to have people contribute to your lives. And yes, of course, the strength of having those folks around you and exploring that, because also that might give you clues about how your relationship with them can also be part of their journey as well and their connection to you. Yeah. But I really appreciate that. Wonderful, wonderful.
So yeah, we're gonna wrap up this section. I just wanted to say, I've been doing a lot of reading recently on like solution focused therapy, and there's this word that came up in one of these articles they call them sparkling exceptions, right? You look for the sparkling exception, the times when the problem isn't there, and you're thinking about like, what are those exceptions and what's going on when that problem isn't there? What happened to make it that the problem doesn't come up? So it's something that could happen in the past that doesn't happen anymore, or it could be sometimes there's a problem that you're having, right? I'm feeling like I want to die or that I want to kill myself. There are times that you don't. So what's going on then? And so expressing that curiosity. So that's what it reminded me of.
Yeah. So it's time for a break. Yeah.
Yes. So we're going to take a break. So we're going to give everybody just, maybe 3 to 5 minutes. So we're going to come back at 11:15. And so, take break, take some water, and we'll see you in 5 minutes.
If anyone wants, I'm going to be here. We'll be here. If anyone wants to share their thoughts or anything that they wanted to add from the previous discussion, we can kind of fill that space up now here, but take a break.
Hi, Jim, real quick, if you don't
Yeah,
mind.
Susan. Yeah.
Okay, so I do a lot of training on how to engage the person who causes harm. And so, that person who causes harm comes with a lot of denial, minimizing, and as such. So, we're trying to look at the person causing harm who has to co-parent as a person who's gone through trauma, but that's also a way for them to deny and minimize. So that's why I asked my question. And so
No, absolutely.
yeah, and so when you really interfacing with them, I need to be able to give some strong some of the things you said are do's, right? But keeping people focused so that they don't allow that person to minimize or deny. And also I like what you said. You accurately empathize, but you don't condone the behavior. So that's kind of tricky. So
Well,
I don't know if we could kind of play that out a little bit while we're on break.
Well, we absolutely will. And actually, there'll be more of an opportunity to do that because, as I said, I think the other part of that is validation. So we've been talking about, empathy, accurate empathy, and curiosity, but also validation. And I think that's where we can come back to this discussion then to see if some of the things that we're going to discuss then are important because what that takes is, oftentimes perpetrators can do things obviously that really go against our own moral code. It can be really triggering for us, but it's important to still validate the person, not the behavior, right? And what that means sometimes is validating their thoughts, maybe their experiences, understanding too that sometimes, just a reminder, right? Sometimes those perpetrators are themselves victims of their own abuse. They have their own trauma histories.
And that's where they
Sometimes,
go down, and that's where they go down that slippery slope. And so you have to stay
Right.
away from that, And so I'm just looking at ways in which I can also put the whole notion of a trauma informed lens around working with the person causing harm while you hold them accountable. And I think that you have to have skills for that. So
Yeah, well, and again, I think, and as I said, that when you said slippery slope, what did you mean? Of their own,
well,
like,
in terms of the slippery slope, I can use my past trauma to minimize what I'm doing in terms of my coercive abusive behaviors. I could use my I can use my intersectionalities to minimize what I'm doing.
right. And so one of the things, right, and again, we'll talk about this a little bit more, but validating that experience, right? So we can say, for example,
Excuse my
what it,
metaphor.
no, it's metaphors, as I said, are wonderful. But it does take understanding that history. And I'm not saying not all perpetrators or people who cause harm have their own trauma histories. It's often very, very likely, but exploring that can give you that space to be able to say, I could understand, it makes sense that you may have reacted the way you do because of your trauma history and right, the accountability, right? Also being able to shift into, given those past experiences, you're still responsible for your choices, and we need to explore other ways of responding, right? Doing that in a very connected way, in a gentle way, can be very powerful. So, but recognizing that may be a factor. And then also still holding the person accountable. We can do both.
I think also, Susan, there's, when folks are often, and it sounds like the folks that you're working with maybe are mandated to come to see you. I think oftentimes when folks are being asked to come,
Well,
and
actually, we're looking at the front line that has to investigate allegations of abuse and neglect.
right. So I think that part of it also is assessing, like there's working with someone who's maybe perpetrated harm. I think first thing is also like, is there an immediate safety concern, right? Because I think oftentimes we think about not necessarily when you're confronting someone about behavior that they've had, is it because we need to address an immediate safety concern, or is it because we're trying to help shift or change a behavior? I think that once there is no immediate safety concern, then
we could move to the point of shift behavior, because as child protection, they're going to make sure that that immediacy is removed. Now we're working with that person.
I think that I read this really great chapter in a book recently that was talking about, when people are mandated to therapy, there's like one of two stances that sometimes people take. Either they think this is not a problem, or they think this is a problem, but I have no control over it. And so it sort of gave some examples about how do you connect with, especially for the folks who think this is not a problem, how do you connect with what is important to them rather than getting in a cycle of you trying to get them to see the problem and them minimizing, right? Because that's what
you just validated some of the work we're doing. Okay.
Yeah.
Again,
well, actually,
right.
as folk, no, Susan, and actually, it's a great segue into our next section. So, Jackie, if you want to bring up the slide, we have folks coming back. So, and for folks who took a break, and Susan, take a break if you need to step away, because I know you kind of we filled up your break.
Yeah, sorry to manipulate your time, but
take care of yourself. But
I
I think
love the conversation, though.
Yes.
I listened to the content of this conversation and I thought it was great. Thank you so much for that discussion.
Thank you, Elena. And yes, thank you for bringing it up. So for those of you who weren't around, Susan at the break was bringing up what she had brought up earlier, this question of, how do you address people who cause other people harm, perpetrators of harm, and parents who engage in child abuse, other ways. And how do you avoid or try to address the issue of denial at times? So we're going to move into validation, and I think it brings up, this point that we've talked about before. Validation is so critical because it helps us better understand the people we're serving, regardless of what they're coming in for. And again, perpetrators of harm can oftentimes bring up a lot of stuff in us. It can definitely bring up our judgment. It can definitely bring up our desire to want to fix and change right away. And the same kind of things that we're talking about apply. How do you sort of connect with those folks, but also hold them accountable? So as we talk about validation, that is one way. And certainly, the other things that we've already talked about are clearly important as well. Understanding, being curious about one's experiences, and being able to empathize with aspects of that person's behavior. When it's someone who perpetrates. So we're going to talk a lot about validation next, and I'm going to kind of go through this quickly, and then we're going to do some more exercises on validation. But the value of validation is really about being able to see someone. I think we even touched on that a little bit earlier, right? You see someone, you hear, you understand the value of the people we serve. And in some cases, finding that value can be really compromised when it's someone who's, again, engaging in harmful behavior. But oftentimes, as we mentioned earlier, people who are highly dysregulated have a hard time connecting with others or connecting to you. So it can be really hard. But validation is just our way of seeing, hearing, and recognizing someone, acknowledging someone in a deep way. It can promote connection. And the relationships with you that you have with folks can help to fuel change. allows feelings to be shared without being fixed. In other words, those feelings that come up, right? Having someone share about their history of suicidality or depression without necessarily being fixed to those feelings, but giving space, holding space for those feelings to come up. Sending messages about acceptance, and acceptance again, not condoning, just accepting, understanding where someone is coming from, not necessarily condoning them. And helps to identify feelings of identification, identifying them, and helping them to deepen their understanding of their own identification and your identification with them. And then it can lead to change, right? So validation with a twist, and this is what I was getting at the break, Susan. Validation with a twist. I could understand. So using the example of someone who's caused harm, I could understand how you might have reacted the way you did, and you're also responsible for your behavior, and we need to explore other ways of responding. But I could understand where the anger comes from. I could understand where the frustration comes from. But and in your case, Susan, right, hitting your children, or however you want to phrase that, right, thinking about other ways of responding is critically important, and that kind of sort of greases the wheel for change. So as we, and again, we're going to go deeper into this and do some more exercises. These are just some various forms of validation that you can kind of express in your work. Confirming the facts. You've had to wait for 45 minutes. Again, right? Somebody comes in, they're frustrated, they're angry, they're upset, they're dysregulated, right? And trust me, I think we've all been there. I've been there where, as a patient going into a hospital, right, where you're upset about something and someone says, "I'm sorry, I couldn't do anything. I can't do anything about that." But you've had to wait for 45 minutes, just confirming the facts of why someone. Emotional labeling. I can hear how much anger and frustration came up for you during that argument. By the way, I'm just going to connect the dots to our previous discussion, right? Some ways in terms of being curious, like when we were talking about Michael, I believe, getting frustrated, like, oh, his difficulties with being able to attend, and feeling lost sometimes at work. That must be really frustrating for you when you're in class and you can't pay attention or connect, right? But here, I can hear how much anger and frustration came up for you during that argument. Acknowledging perspectives. It makes sense that being in a crowded space can be overwhelming. These are some ways in which, again, we can bring in that trauma lens, right? For someone who oftentimes finds it difficult to be in public spaces or feel crowded, sort of acknowledging that perspective. Agreeing with the principle. I believe that everyone should be treated respectfully. So if someone comes in and says, "I don't like being disrespected," and how many of you raise a hand if you work with especially young people, but adults as well, who are like, do not respond well when they're disrespected. And again, from a trauma lens, that response can be incredibly, that feeling of being disrespected, not heard, not validated, is very common among people who've experienced a lot of
I
trauma.
think this is also, Jim, sorry, do you mind if I might jump
Please.
in? Sounds like, sorry, you were talking about working in a school, but oftentimes we work, even if you're not in a school, you're working with other professionals, and a client or someone may come to you and say, "This person disrespected me," right? This was so like they did this, blah, 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 all these things. And you work with that person. You don't want to create this triangulation between you and another member of your team, or a teacher that you're working with, or an administrator, or whatever it is. Or you may not even agree that what they did was that disrespectful, right? This saying, "I believe that everyone should be treated with respect," is a great way to sort of validate that feeling of feeling disrespected is something that you don't want for that person, and while not necessarily colluding with them or creating these sort of difficult triangulation situations in a team. So I just wanted to name that.
That's great, Jackie. Yeah, thanks for adding that on, right? It's a way of acknowledging that feeling, or that sort of that principle of wanting to be treated respectfully without necessarily joining them in beating someone else up or attacking someone else. And then affirming the odds and normalizing. A lot of people would be upset by that. it's understandable. Anybody would be upset by what that is. And again, this is certainly obviously these are kind of out of context, but you get the idea. Especially for you, if you can understand someone being upset, it's okay to sort of normalize that response. And then lastly, affirming strengths and resilience. It says a lot about you that you were able to stay in control despite how out of control you felt. And I want to go back to our previous vignette, right? It says a lot about you that you've been able to deal with, your struggles with suicide, and how you felt inside. And again, that can oftentimes be a segue into those questions, right? What is it that helped you get through that? So these are just different forms of validation. And then a few best practices. So be authentic. It's really important that we avoid scripts, right? So even though we're providing you scripts here, again, just reiterating, we don't expect you to use those. It has to be genuine and in context. And use their language, again, going back to the previous example, I struggled with suicide. I'm not there anymore, right? And it's okay to use their language. Starting simple, words and emotions at first, focusing on those words and emotions that folks are sharing with you, using their own words and emotions at first, just reflecting that back to them, and ensuring that what you're hearing is correct. But then get more complex with time. And what we mean by that is then you can move into emotions and the deeper meaning that someone's emotions, thoughts, or behavior have for them in their lives. And then pairing acceptance with change. And this is the part that we were talking about before, like validation with a twist. So gently confronting behaviors and thoughts, and then moving into thinking about how folks can do things differently, especially in cases where there's harm, right? We can be clear on our perspective. It is not okay to do that. And again, you want to be gentle about that, but understanding where thoughts might be coming from, and confronting those behaviors that might not be healthy, risky, or might be harm to others. And then a few pitfalls and how to address them. And then again, we're going to have some examples so that we can do some practice around this. Common pitfall, silver lining, right? Acknowledging strengths and struggle. That it's important to sort of acknowledge strengths and struggles, but be careful about silver lining it. And this is where that a little bit more, that it gets a little bit more nuanced, because sometimes what we can do is take someone sharing something difficult and then try to silver line it. But also it's important to sort of acknowledge the strengths and struggles. It must have been really difficult to do that, and you were able to fill in the blank. Toxic positivity. Again, this is being able to sit with discomfort. So oftentimes our natural response might be to be really positive with the person, try to bring, especially someone who oftentimes focuses, and Susan, to your point, right? Denial can also be sort of someone who just focuses on all of their difficulties and all of their struggles, and it may take time to get to the point where they can, but being able to sit with that discomfort and just hold it with the other person. False praise or vague compliments. Good job, great job, all those kinds of things. It's important to know the story first, and then compliments and praise are much more kind of in context and clear and more real and genuine to the person. Sometimes we double down. And what we mean by that is just kind of sticking to in sort of our judgments, or sticking to our perspective, being able to work in that gray area, as we were talking about earlier. Most of the times, in my experience, a lot of times there's a lot of gray. Things are not black and white. So being able to hold both, and be able to sort of work in that gray area.
Also true if a client rejects the validation, right? So we might be like, wow, you like, that was so impressive the way that you there. No, it wasn't. Like, it wasn't da 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 da. I'm like, no, it was. No, it was. That can be something, we might see a strength that they don't see. We might feel hope that they don't feel. And we also want to acknowledge that that might be hard for them to hold. And we, you know, we don't want to take it where we're trying to force that perspective on them.
Can I interject? Right before you went into like common pitfalls, I was thinking about the situations that most of the people that I work with come from, right? Like 20 years of high school students who are at risk from communities of color, broken homes. A lot of stuff has been really, really difficult for them growing up, and then now undocumented immigrants, you know, largely Latino in the hospital, coming for services, having crossed the border many times illegally or undocumented without papers, and having to travel all around to multiple countries. So again, really, really deep hardships. So I think their experiences naturally bring them to have negativity, right? Kind of having been beaten down. They feel negative. They feel like the world is against them. They feel like maybe even slight forms of paranoia where, you know, no one believes me, everyone's against me, everyone's out to get me. That is definitely the case in many, you know, African American communities historically, where a lot of my students come from. So I think the pitfall is exactly like you said, to try to line it, create a silver lining, toxic positivity, giving them false praise and vague compliments. That doesn't necessarily do them very good all of the time. And so kind of validating their feelings and where they're coming from is equally important, and be like, you know, hey, I understand what you're going through. I understand if you think that this government agency is against you and they don't want you to get SSI and you have to apply multiple times to get SSI, right? Because they're trying to make you prove yourself and make it harder for you to get the benefits that you deserve. So kind of validating the positionality that they're coming from, as well as providing and encouraging them and giving them genuine praise, and, you know, having them to see the upside and the positive sides in their life.
And Usuri, one of the things, and we won't be able to get in a deep discussion, but I do want to name it, is that also what you're also kind of identifying too is making the connections between trauma, so racism, discrimination, poverty, right? All of these things increase the possibility that folks can be exposed to trauma and adversity. Believing folks, right? So oftentimes what we can sometimes do, what can happen sometimes, is our denial, maybe not denial, maybe we do recognize that, but kind of sidestepping those issues. So definitely one of the purposes of trauma-informed care is to also understand things like that: racism, oppression, discrimination, all of those are forms of trauma, acknowledging that too. Because for me, the important part about trauma-informed care is I don't want folks walking around putting everything, all of the difficulties and challenges they have on their shoulders, right? There are systems in place to in many cases that contribute to someone's trauma. So I just want to, I really appreciate that. And oftentimes we have to recognize that and name it and talk about it. And I'm going to share a video with you all that you can take a look at on your own at some point. That is a really nice video that was created by some folks at Northwestern University that really gets at how do you process things like discrimination and racial trauma in effective ways. But thank you for bringing that up.
James?
Yeah.
Jim, can you elaborate a little bit more on doubling down, the holding the both and?
I think sometimes being able to sort of operate in that, so doubling down, I think is, you know, as Jackie was saying, what we might do is validate. So I think what she was explaining was that this often occurs if someone does not accept our validating remarks, right? Like we try to validate like that was, incredibly sort of powerful or courageous on your part, or however we might try to either reframe or validate an experience, and the person might push back, right? Like not really believe it. And we might double down and say, no, no, you really are. You're more powerful. We sometimes, and it kind of can overlap a little bit with toxic positivity. You really are a lot more powerful than you think you are. We might do those things, and being able to hold both and, right? In other words, being able to be in that space where we can acknowledge the strength, but also that person really not feeling that, and acknowledging that as well. And it could also be that that it's also a space to continue to work. I work with a young woman with developmental challenges as well as a history of trauma. Her self-esteem is often dragging way behind, and in her case, I oftentimes try to do that. She resists it, and we talk about, well, let's talk about some other ways we can help build that as well, because it sounds like it's really difficult for you to acknowledge your own strengths. But that can be a place to move forward and think about it, right? When we think about all the folks that we work with who struggle with their own self-esteem, that's kind of a way to start that conversation. Does that make sense, Elena?
Yeah, it does make sense. And but what's still kind of in the back of my mind is clearly this person doesn't feel that they are deserving of this
Yeah.
praise, or and I would want to kind of follow that thread,
Oh yeah.
and kind of explore how come you feel that you seem to feel that you don't deserve this praise, and I'm wondering why, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for saying that, Elena. So when we think about, so one of the things when we were putting this training together is we want to be clear, right? This is not an evidence-based treatment. This is not a recipe book. So thank you so much for saying that, Elena, because what we see is that you're recycling, you're using these, right? It's not like we're saying use a lot of curiosity and empathy at the beginning, and then you move into a phase where you're kind of, thinking about validation. You're constantly cycling through these. So I really appreciate you saying that, because it can bring you back to, maybe curiosity, right? Let's get curious about that, and why it is that you find it difficult to accept, that validation, or accept that praise. Great example. And then the last one is validating the unhealthy behaviors. So again, going back to the point we've already made, validating unhealthy behaviors, you can include in that, harmful behaviors, risky behaviors that others might engage in that you don't want to. Stick with emotions, stick with their experiences, with their thoughts, and focus on those. So I'm going to hand it over to, oh, no, I'm sorry. So these are just some examples in terms of providing validation, some examples, recognizing a person's emotional experiences and affirming its inherent worth. It could look like you have every right to feel upset and angry. I think anyone who went through what you would feel would feel the same way. Acknowledging a person's strengths and efforts, it makes sense that getting told you're not good enough throughout your life would affect your self-esteem, right? And this is kind of on point with what we're talking about right now. Reframing behaviors is an understandable and expected response to adversity. So these are all various examples of kind of addressing those various forms of validation. It was really brave of you to step back from that fight yesterday. It shows how hard you've been working to find new ways to interact with others. And for those of you who work with young people, understanding the stories, I've worked with a number of young people who've actually had engaged in fights, but when you hear the story about what brought them to that fight and how they responded that way, oftentimes that can make sense as well. So it's understandable that you went there, and right, what can we do to sort of change what happens moving forward so that you're not in that position again? I kind of feel like we have been doing this, but yeah.
I think we can
Go ahead,
to the next
Jackie.
slide. I just think we can go to the next slide because I think we've sort of covered this.
Yep. Yeah, and I think you've already given plenty of examples of that. So as we move into our next practice activity, Jackie, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, so we're gonna be doing an activity just to practice what we talked about. So practice coming up with some validating statements. Obviously, you know, you don't know all of the context behind this, but the young person we're gonna be working with is Michael. So some of you may remember Michael from last session or from this session. You know, Michael's 17. If you were working with Carrie in the last activity, this is Carrie's son. And so you're talking to Michael and he begins to tell you about a fight that he got in at school. And so on the following slides are quotes from Michael about what happened. And so you can use the chat or you can unmute. And I would love to, you know, so for each one, we're going to come up with a validating statement that you can, what Michael is saying. Okay. And the idea is also that we're going to be providing a validating statement that doesn't necessarily co-sign or, you know, any of the statements we don't want to validate or condone behavior that we don't want to sort of, we don't want to collude with him on that. So just keeping that in mind. Okay. So I swear that the people at that school are trying to get me expelled. They're looking for any little thing that they can to push me out. I got another suspension last week. That's the third one this semester. So again, you can unmute or you can use the chat. What is a validating statement that you could provide to Michael? I'll give some people some time to type.
I think one thing is he's attending school.
So what might you say? What would be the statement?
I can appreciate that even though it's been so difficult for you and challenging, you've been attending school.
Yeah, great. Love that.
Yeah, I would say it sounds to me like you feel that everything is out of your control and that you cannot have an impact on what happens in your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's acknowledging the perspective that he has.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Acknowledging that that's what he is experiencing right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Renee, it sounds like school is important to you.
And if I may, and I think, you know, that it sounds like, you know, despite the fact that this is going on, that this is your experience, you're still going. So you can validate actually a positive behavior. You're still attending.
Any other potential validating statements?
The other thing is that he has not been expelled. So even if it might lead to that, I would say the good news is that you have not been expelled. So then I would look at how might we circumvent that from happening.
Okay, yeah.
And I just want to sort of press on that a little bit because, and I'm not labeling that could be experienced as being a little more positive than the statement is saying. So you might get pushback on that, right? In other words, you're still like, what he's saying here is not very favorable towards his attitudes towards the school.
Right.
Laura DeSalvo is saying, it seems that you feel like you're being treated unfairly, right? Just restating like, or reframing what he's saying.
And Laura, I feel like you could also even answer that, be like, nobody likes to feel like they're not getting fair treatment, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So, you know, just like saying, like, you're not saying whether it's unfair or not. You're saying no one likes to feel that way, right? And yeah, from Jennifer, it sounds like you've been working hard, right? So really acknowledging the work that's been happening. Can you help me understand what's going on? So yeah, so I think also, yeah, you can pair those validations with that follow-up and that expressing interest. Help me understand, putting him in that position of sort of like, you understand what's going on. Let me hear what you know, let me help me to understand.
Yeah. And to pair that with what other folks have been saying around him still going, that's a nice pair. I think the way you're framing that, Jackie, that's a nice pair, which is, you know, it sounds like you're being treated unfairly or you feel you're being treated unfairly, and yet you're going to school. help me, like, what is it that keeps you going to school? So that's a nice pairing where you're sitting with what he's sitting with, and then kind of twisting it towards, what's bringing you to school then? If if I felt that way, I'd probably not want to go to school, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Simple reflection. Susan says simple reflection, like saying, I'm hearing that you feel like you're being singled out. Yeah, that's there, right? Like he feels like it's just him. And it may not be, and that's not agreeing, like, but it's that he's feeling like he's being singled out. Yeah.
And then again, you can connect or validate how hard that feeling must be, right? It doesn't feel good to anyone. Like I hate feeling like when in situations where I feel like there's nobody on my side, that's a terrible feeling. I can validate that that does not feel good. Yeah.
Jackie, you want to move to another? Oh, okay, go ahead.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, no, we can move to the other one. Yeah.
We have another one, but I'll go ahead and move on. And Ayana says, I hear that you're facing challenges at school. What are they going to get you? What are they going to get you? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. What are they doing to get you expelled? Gotcha. Oh, that's interesting. And I think to Jackie's point, being a little careful, because what are they doing? That could sound like you might be, kind of kind of pressing against the school, but depending on where you are, that could be perfectly right. Like if I'm in a school, that could be a little bit harder to do because you might want to massage that, but certainly if you're not in the school, you can kind of push that. What do you think they're doing to get you expelled? Yeah.
Okay, so we go on to the next part of the conversation. So Michael says, I was just trying to mind my own business, and out of nowhere, this kid gets up in my face, calling me a freak. I tried to tell him to shut up, but he kept on going off and started pushing at me. What am I supposed to do? Let him beat on me? No, ma'am. So I grabbed him and put him in a headlock. Okay.
So this is that. Yeah, Susan, right? How do you validate when someone's engaging and sharing with you that they've engaged in a behavior that, Lena, it seems like you felt threatened in that moment.
No. So really like
Others. Yeah.
on that.
How do you, so the trick here is, right, how do you validate the experience, the emotion, without necessarily the behavior?
I think like my first initial reaction is like, I'm so sorry you had to experience that, where this kid come and jumped out in your face. That's really unfortunate, and I understand, even though it's not condoning it, but I see why you did what you did in self-defense.
Right. It is hard to have someone come at you, and I can absolutely validate how hard that is.
Yeah. And it's, Jennifer says, it seems like you felt the need to defend yourself. Right? It sounds like, Laura says, it sounds like you really tried not to react, but were pushed to your limit. Calling me a freak. Gotcha. Yeah. That's there. Sometimes as you think about these validating statements, does it fit with what you're hearing? That was a really, Laura, that was really good. It sounds like you really tried hard. It's there, right? He calling me a freak. I tried to tell him to shut up, but he kept going off starting on me, right? So he was trying other things.
Right. Yeah. It seems like you really tried to set a boundary. You tried not to react. You tried to, someone said,
fantastic stuff. Yeah.
Control your response until you weren't able to do so. Yes. And then you can also, you can then shift potentially to exploring what they could have done differently. And also by really acknowledging how the effort, you could also, talk about like, I can see that standing up for yourself is important to you, right? It's important for you to make sure that, like you get respect, right? We all want respect, validating that it's important to feel respect. It's important to feel safe, right? Again, attaching to what's important to the person or what the meaning is or what the emotions are. And I can see that in all of their
and a few, and yeah. Okay.
I think, thank you, Jim. I think the question is like, how do you go and get that respect, right? It's not through violence.
Absolutely.
It's not through putting
And you
someone
don't
in a
have to, and you
headlock,
don't have to, and you
even
don't
though
have to
you
validate the
feel
head.
like your
Right.
gut reaction is to do that first, and you might even move to do that, but you draw yourself back and be like, okay, in your mind, what should I do? And as teenagers, their brains are not as developed and advanced. They're not fully grown in terms of their brain and the cerebral frontal lobe or whatever it is. But you know, you want to direct them and guide them towards knowing how to
Absolutely.
walk in peace, right? And
Problem
like,
solve. Yep.
yeah.
I
Problem
think
solve.
that the issue here, you know, what we're trying to do here, obviously, we're not saying that putting someone in a headlock is okay. And also, if Michael does not feel seen, it might be really hard for him to engage and be even willing or open to exploring how he might do something different next time, or, you know, an alternative. And so part of this is also figuring out how can we make him feel seen and validated so that he will be open to potentially exploring those different things. We obviously don't want to collude with him and saying, yeah, it's totally fine for you to put someone in a headlock if they disrespect you. Like, absolutely
But
not.
it is fine.
You know, I
Jokes,
mean,
jokes.
context
So one of the
dependent.
and I know you're laughing with everybody. I think that's the thing. It's like it's understandable you might react that way,
Of
but
course.
right, and but
Of
I you know
course.
Pamela kind of hits on that transition from validation to kind of and moving forward. It sounds like you really tried to control your response until you were no longer able to do so. And then what are some other responses you could have had? And maybe we can practice them to see if another response would be more effective. And one of the things I just want to put out there on that, Pamela, is your priming, right? And what I mean by that is you might not necessarily have to start that right now, right? So because I think we could just this is more a feel and nuance about it, but certainly talking about how we can sort of focus our work on that and how you can manage those situations, right? But it starts with validating the person's experience of the event.
And in
And I think a lot
particular,
of
also, and we're going to move on after this, but
Yeah.
in particular, also, a lot of you focused on the moments when he was able to resist it. He started out with using words, right? And so also there was at some point, as I think someone said, that he reached a limit. So how can we maybe extend that limit, right? So let's think about what was it like when you were reaching that limit, right? So, you know, it can also just be, you don't even have to start thinking about like all of the things that you did wrong, but just extending the things you did right? Just blowing, you know, and sort of even strengthening the strengths as opposed to focusing on all of the things, I think that oftentimes also, you know, Michael's 17, first of all, we're probably not the first adult to tell him all the things he did wrong in this situation, right? And I mean, he got suspended. Like, he already clearly has been told that he did it wrong. And so really focusing on sort of not being yet another adult that is telling him all the things he's doing wrong, but really keeping that, okay, what can we extend that you're doing right? Okay, we're gonna do this last one,
These
and
are all
then
great examples.
So I just wanted to apologize if I misconstrued, if there's any misunderstanding. I was just trying to bring some levity to a very, very serious
I think
topic.
that we absolutely, I mean, honestly, we absolutely, absolutely. I always appreciate making jokes. I feel like social work jokes are always appreciated. So, okay, of course the vice principal comes after me. I'm the one who gets suspended. Nobody says anything about how that kid was up in my face and provoking me. And I know there were adults there who saw the whole thing. It's some BS. Those people have got it out for me. Okay, give people a couple of seconds to type, think.
And while folks are doing that, I think everyone can do this, but these examples of validations are just are so many are so spot on. And I really appreciate you engaging with this. I also want to say for folks, Vanessa, correct me if I'm wrong. I know we can do this. There is you can save the chat. So if folks want to see more of these and look at them and kind of, again, not scripted, but just see examples of these, and these are wonderful ones, you can save the chat on your end. Vanessa, they can do it as well, right? The audience can do that?
In terms of saving the chat, I think that might just be a Zoom post functionality as
Okay,
opposed to the audience, but
no worries.
there is the transcript.
Please feel free to
So-
save those, and yeah, thanks, Vanessa. I wasn't sure about that, but there is a way to save the chat. Certainly feel free to, cut and paste those if you like the way they're framed. All right, what are we getting?
It sounds like you feel unseen and not understood. Feeling targeting and that others have it out for you. It feels like a hard spot to be in. Yeah. Thanks, Doreen. I hear that you believe you've been treated unfairly. I understand how hard it is to feel like people aren't standing up for you. No one likes that experience. Renee, love that. Yes. You can feel really alone, really connecting to that feeling of like, no one is standing up for me. Look, adults are not on my side. And maybe that's something that is a familiar feeling for him.
Well, and just a reminder too, that what's very common for people who've experienced trauma in their lives is that yes, they have a real hard time with any authority figures, right? If you've been abused or mistreated in your life, right, authority figures can be very threatening. And so validating that, right? Like, especially the fact that it's coming from authority figures, that would also be some space to go in. When else have you felt that way? Like people who, teachers and principals, they should be there for you, and you're feeling like they're not.
But also
There've
he's
been other
saying
times
that
when you felt
school
that.
staff, he's saying school staff witnessed it and did not intervene, did not protect him.
Yeah.
And
It
so
sounds
he
like, yeah.
escalated it up. I mean, I don't know if that's going on in his home, but with trauma, often there can be a witness to it who does
Yep.
not step in.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, all of these ways of validating, and then as we said earlier, then switching into curiosity. Where else have you felt that? When else have you felt like that?
Yeah.
Like people are not there to back you up. The people who are there, who are supposed to be there for you, are not, right? These are great. Other examples, Jackie, that you're seeing?
Yeah, I like Ayana, you're saying, I understand you feel alone. Who do you feel that you can trust to have your back in these kinds of situations? Yeah. So really thinking about like that feeling of loneliness. I understand your frustration from Julene. Sounds like you feel like no one understands you. Susan, it's always hard to feel singled out and misunderstood. Yeah, that's something we can all address. Again, I think that, it's really tempting to want to jump straight to what this person should be doing differently, and I think that really sometimes staying with them in those really lonely feelings can be hard for us even as adults, because we want them to like, you're like, oh yes, and also you're making this worse. And also sometimes it can be hard to we can feel sort of this desperation, at least I can, right, to sort of want to make things better. And sometimes it's about sitting in that this is a really hard, lonely space to be in. And now you feel like you've been punished for it, which is just reinforcing that no one cares about me and what happens to me.
I think
Susan,
like
yeah.
this
Susan, I'm sorry, just real quick, Sarah, I just want to share. Susan says, I have a client who always felt singled out at school, and I pointed out that it was probably not a coincidence that she always felt like her mom's and dad's least favorite child. I work with clients in the home, and I have witnessed this dynamic at home, so I don't want to join in on the gaslighting.
We also
And
don't know, right? This
Well-
could be right, right?
Well,
You
and the
don't
other
know
thing,
what's
yeah.
behind.
Well, and the other thing that I appreciate about what you're saying, Susan, you could only do that if you know the story, right? So you would have to know what happened at home, and that at points in this child's life, they felt like the least favorite child, right?
Right.
So I think you can connect the dots and help folks to connect to their own experiences, but you could only do that if you know the story, if you know
Right.
like that child
Mhm.
felt like the least favorite child. Usuri, I'm sorry, I cut
Yeah,
you
just
off.
real quick. I guess another possibility could be is like confirming or supporting that, yeah, it's okay. You're alone. There are loners out there, right? There are drifters, and it's okay. You'll be okay. You're alone. And, you know, there's the future out there where you'll meet people and make friends and not feel like the whole world is against you.
And sometimes that could be an opportunity also for you to sometimes ask the question, right? You can actually even take that a step further and say, look, do I ever make you feel that way? And is there anything that I can do to make you feel less alone and more like you're being supported?
Mhm.
You know, there's a lot of different ways that you can think about how to work. I wasn't sure, as I was mentioning earlier, Susan, I don't know if you wanted to add anything. I wasn't sure if it was you, because if you wanted to add anything to your comments, but I thought I heard another
No,
voice.
yeah, no, I've worked with this family mostly in the home and in the community, so I really agree with her. And it would not be fair for me to say that oh, I've never noticed that. Why do you think they're your least favorite? Parents love all their kids the same. I've witnessed, like, with my own eyes, how she is kind of the least favored. I've seen both of her parents favor other children in the family. There's 11 children, 5 of whom are my clients. So I'm very involved with this family in the home. So I don't want to say, oh, come on, you always feel like you're singled out, because that's gaslighting her and it's not
Yeah,
fair.
yeah, and yeah, and I think that goes to some degree back to the doubling down that we were talking
Mhm.
about earlier, right? No, no, no. Yeah. Oh my,
Right,
if you say that to a kid who feels that way, right?
right.
Like, no, everybody, parents love all their children, you're
Not necessarily true.
exactly, and the relationship and your relationship gets rocked.
And
Yeah.
Right.
similarly, also, Jennifer is saying that this can also happen in schools, right? It is possible. It can be, we don't want to necessarily like, you know, especially if you're working in a school, you don't want to be like, oh, well, like, no, that's not true. That like they're not singling you out. They da da da. Maybe they are, right? We actually don't know. And even if you're not in the school, right, you don't actually know. And so you know, trying to sort of undercut this young person's perspective can just make it feel like, again, you're another adult that doesn't believe them. You're always going to take the side of the other adult in the situation. You're another person that doesn't see them or is not on their side, right? So it's not necessarily, again, it doesn't mean we have to be like, oh yeah, they are taking advantage of you and they are clearly do have it out to get for you. We don't have to do that. But we can still validate them and not undercut their perspective. So yeah, I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
So
There, yeah,
we're going
there's
to,
some wonderful comments in the chat, but I will come back because I wanted to.
I just want to make sure that we, and Jim, we might have to, do you want to, so what do you think? Do you want to do the video now? Just for
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
Okay,
And
great.
and so really quick, so this is it's a little bit of a shift because there's some validation here, but it's a recorded interview, a demonstration of some of the skills that we're talking about in action. We're going to show a brief snippet. The vignette for this is a parent who is coming in because they were referred for services. Um, and to ACS because of an incident that took place at school. Full transparency. It's my belief that oftentimes when we're working with parents and we're beginning intake processes, I want to understand the parent's experience. So what you'll be seeing here is a kind of intake, not a kind of intake, an intake with a parent who was initially referred, and some of these skills in action. So please feel free to note down. And I will say, oh, I should just be clear. I'm in the video, so I want to give you full permission. Please, please, Fee, I am not perfect. Give me, if you see things that you would do differently, or if you think there are things that could have been done differently, please feel free to point them out. And with that said, Jackie, I think you have control of the video. So I just want
So
just move it
welcome.
to like 118, about 115, 1 minute and 15 in. And we're gonna go for just about 3 minutes. There's more of this video, but and stop at around 4:40.
Okay, sounds good.
After that.
And so when your mom was at the school and things got a little loud, can you say a little bit more about that?
I mean, I don't think it was a big deal. It's not like it's new. It's something that happens. Just that this time she did it in the school, and she did it in public, but it was very embarrassing. Like the teachers were there. She started telling me that I'm not a good parent, that I don't know how to parent, that I should hit my kids and things like that. And I mean, that's the way she raised me, but I don't think it's right. But that's what we were dealing with, and because she got loud, everybody was judging us and talking about us, obviously. And then they just sent us, an ACS worker.
It sounds like it was incredibly embarrassing for you to have that happen. Anybody would be stressed out, especially when ACS is called. Can you say a little bit more about your mom always being this way when you said that?
Okay, so we do have some conflict with my mom. I used to live in Texas before with my 2 boys. We had a house, they had space, they had, their friends there. So we left everything behind. During the pandemic, I lost my job, so I had to come back to New York. My mom is the only person that I can kind of get help with right now. But my mom has another idea as to how she would do things with my children, which I'm not okay with, because the way she raised me was very different and it wasn't very positive, and there are not a lot of good memories when it comes to that. So I'm going to say I raise my children differently. I don't put my hands on them. I talk to them, and it has worked so far.
Yeah, that must have been really hard for you growing up. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Honestly, I don't know why we're talking about this. This referral was for my son, so I don't know why we have to go deep into what's going on with my mom and whatnot. I don't think it's necessary. So I don't know how to feel about that right now.
Okay. And I could totally understand. And it is completely up to you how much you share with me. I think the reason why I'm asking is because it sounds like your mom is a part of what's going on in the home and affecting you and affecting your son. And that's why I want to better understand what's happening, because you're so important in all of this. And if there's stuff that's going on that's impacting you, I'd like to better understand that.
So when I was small, I had a lot of trouble in school. I hated it. And I guess Stefan is going through the same thing, right? He was diagnosed with ADHD. I was never diagnosed. That wasn't a thing. He was just a bad kid. And that's who I was. So obviously my mom disciplined me by hitting me, by, kneeling on rice or just slapping me or belt or whatever it was. And I grew up that way. I do not want to raise my children that way. And when we went to Texas and we created a life, we rented a house, had a backyard, a pool. My children had a space of their own, their friends. Everything was good. Everything was different. And it's not.
Thank you, Jackie. There's more, and we can also share these videos, brief examples of ways in which we're using, or I'm using, a trauma-informed lens, and some of the skills that we're talking about here. Some of them we've touched on, some of them we haven't quite touched on yet. Certainly curiosity, empathic responding, but and again, please feel free. Your thoughts. What did you see worked? What might you have done differently?
So I like the way that he really had a transparent conversation with the parent to just figure out why they're in the possible predicament. So I think it was brave of him to do that, because the truth is they reside with the grandmother, and it sounds like she's an important part in like the housing and everything. And I do think that it's an issue. As much as she felt uncomfortable to talk about it, I do think it's very relevant, and I think it's great that
he confronted her in a professional way about it. And it's sort of like, it sounds like the mother did not realize how much of an impact that it is creating. So that was like a breakthrough in regards to watching it.
Thank you, Evelyn. I appreciate that. And again, I just want to connect it to a trauma-informed lens, right? So we know one form of trauma is intergenerational trauma, right? And this is an example of that to some degree. In her particular case, right, a mom who's working against that history, that legacy of abuse in the family, but important to understand. I'm just curious for folks. I'm curious. Why would this be important to understand? I mean, I know I gave my rationale, but
I think it's shaping the way she parents, is shaping a lot of her life that she lives, determines the way she lives. And she needs that connection to be brought to her consciousness because subconsciously she's raising kids. She's doing these things based on the things her mother did that she doesn't like. So it's definitely something that needed to be bring to the conscience and make her more self-aware of that. And like the young lady said, mom is in the picture, mom is in the home, mom is present with the raising, and she's going to have her opinions. And so she has to deal with the resistance of what she likes to do against what her mom wants her to do.
thank you, Yana. Yeah, and I think understanding the context of her behavior can be really important. We've learned a lot about her and the stressors that she's going through just on that level alone, right? I now better understand what's stressing her out, what is impacting her, not on her individually, her own mental health, as well as how she parents her children. Yeah.
She also brought up the fact that she was undiagnosed but had learning disabilities or problems in school too, similar to her child. So it is reminiscent and things are coming up from the past. Maybe she's just not comfortable to deal with, but it's happening.
I see Renee says instead of assuming how she felt, would it be more helpful to ask what was that like for you? Do you think it's something we might want to explore? Referring to what, Renee? I'm just curious how she felt it would be more helpful to ask what was that like for you. And by the way, if you want to add, Renee, but one of the things is, yeah, what was that like for you? Tell me more. These are all ways of expressing curiosity. So there's so many different ways of doing it. What was that like for you? The embarrassment of the initial event that took place.
I really liked how she gave a little bit of pushback, and she was trying to set a boundary of not going there with her feelings, but she was also very cautious in how she spoke about her mother. And to have to ask someone that you have an abuse history with for help and leave a life that you once liked to now reside there has got to take a tremendous amount of strength.
In all things you can validate, right? There's so much more, right? There's so much more. So as I said, there are things that I can miss. We're working in that space.
No, I was focused on mom, but I'd like to schedule a session. I thought you were very a safe person.
Yeah. Gotcha.
You didn't act like a bulldozer with her at all.
And Renee did clarify the potential for the difference to affect the children when mom isn't around, her upbringing, how she was raised, right? So yeah. And I appreciate you saying that, Renee, because I could imagine for this mom, for Maria, this mom, like I gotta leave my children with her at times, right? So you're right. What is it like for you? If I understand you correctly, Renee, right? What is it like for you to have to leave, right? and your mom's like taking care of the kids. I should say, you know, spoiler alert, that kind of does come out later on in the conversation. But yeah, like her concerns about, you know, how her mom might sort of continue with her parenting um, when she's not around. Absolutely. Pamela says, I saw her discomfort at one point. However, you clarifying your reason for exploring, it gave her permission to speak more about her own traumas. However, I may have suggested she speak with someone for herself, explaining that this would assist her relationship with her children. We do not want history to repeat itself. Yeah, and Pamela, if so, great example, Pamela, of this is also where so topic next week, we're going to talk about how to connect people with the help that they need. So there might be some discussion, and actually we have a good example of that as well. But you're absolutely right, Pamela. It may right. So that's the other thing from a trauma-informed perspective. We have siloed systems, right? We have our child-serving systems and our adult-serving systems, and there are some that are due. But in this particular case, right, mom needs some support. So the identified, quote unquote, the identified patient, client, however you want to put that, in this case would be the son, because that's what they were referred for, as she said. But yeah, like what are mom's needs and how do we support mom? So thank you for sharing that. But that's that
So
trauma
welcome,
informed lens, trying
Maria.
to
It's a pleasure.
understand her experience. Okay. Um, thank you, Jackie. So I the rupture repair opened the conversation opposed to closing the conversation. Thank you, Susan. Yeah. And actually we're going to shift to that, Susan. So Susan mentions the rupture and repair opened up the conversation opposed to closing the conversation, right? And just to be clear, I want to float back to session number 1 when we talked about the principles of trauma-informed care integrated throughout this, right? Trust and transparency, being clear with her and transparent with her about why I'm asking about her experience, right? So that's really critical. Okay. Um, so as we think about some common concerns, Jackie, I'll turn it over to you.
So we're gonna send you out into, so there is a couple things, you know, sometimes, you know, we can do, like, there's a lot of things that come up when we're having conversations with people about stuff that has happened, you know, about trauma or people who have experienced trauma, even if the conversation isn't focused on that. And so we wanted to give you all a chance to do some problem solving around some of the things that commonly come up in sessions. So we have some common concerns we listed here. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 of them. So we're gonna break you out into breakout groups. If you all could choose, like,
Excuse
we're
me,
gonna
Jackie.
Yes.
We haven't had a break in over an hour, and last week we had a break every hour.
Yeah.
Do you think we could have a break?
Totally fine. So yes.
Yeah, actually, because we're a little bit behind anyway. So yeah, this is about the time.
When was, oh yes, our break was gonna be after this activity, but so we can do it now and then we can go into the activity after that.
That would be great.
Okay, so it's 12:17, so we'll come back at 12:22.
Okay,
Thank you, sir.
thank you.
Okay. I know that folks might be still on their break, but we're going to invite people to come back. We're going to do a little bit of a shorter version of this activity. So we're just going to maybe give you all about 8 minutes in the breakout room. Is that okay, Vanessa?
Sounds good.
Great. So what we're going to ask you all to do, so these are some common concerns that come up, you know, in sessions. They're not the only ones that happen. But they're the ones that there are a couple that we thought of. And so I'd like you all in your groups to choose one, maybe two, if you have time for them. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put them in the chat right now. Done. And talk about how you'd handle them. What do you do when this happens? So if you have time for two, that would be great. Hopefully we'll get enough people choosing different ones that we'll get to all of them. So we're going to give you all about 8 minutes and then we'll come back. Questions before we start? Okay. I know that folks are still sort of coming back, so I'm hoping that when we send people out, they'll be able to accept. But yes, so we'll send you all out and then we'll come back after 8 minutes and we'll have a couple people share and then we will move on. Okay, so whenever you are ready, Vanessa, you can send folks into breakout rooms.
Looks like it's just us now.
Great. I texted you, Jim. I don't know if you got it, but we have half an hour left. So
Hi,
let me know.
Pamela. Trouble
Pamela.
joining a breakout room?
Pamela, are you there?
Yeah.
No, I know you're there. Pamela.
Sorry, thought you were asking me.
Okay, great. So Jim, we have about 25 minutes, 30 minutes-ish. I guess 30 because we just need time to wrap up. But we have about 30 minutes left. I'm wondering what you would like, how you'd like to use that time. Given that we just don't have time for a lot of things.
Well, we're not going to have time for the
last activity. I understand that.
Yeah. No, so what I know your suggestion just to skip the slides, but hopefully I think maybe some of the suggestions that they have are going to align with those. So I'm just
that's why we could skip them because if
right, so that's just a compare and contrast. So anything you can add.
Sure.
They may not.
Would you rather?
Yeah. So
yes, but would you rather they miss out on some information Or would you rather they miss out on other information? Because they're going to miss out on information no matter what. So you're going to have to figure out what information you want them to miss out on.
You're saying just skip the next 2 or 3 slides.
It was a suggestion as a possibility. I'm not saying, because if you don't skip these slides, you're just going to skip slides later, right? So you just have to decide which ones you want to skip.
Right.
Because we just don't have time for all of them. So like, I'm not saying like we can cut out, we're going to cut out the, like, for example, do you want to skip these slides or do you want to skip the video is the question, right? Like,
yeah, no, I think we can definitely, if we don't get to the video, that's fine, because I think if we can start the conversation on providing information, and then we can bring in the video and other examples next time.
we also absolutely are already at capacity for next time. So again, if you're going to skip slides, you're going to skip, you might not skip these slides. You might skip the whole self-care section, right? Like we just want to I just want to make sure we're making informed decisions about what we're going to skip or not.
You know what, Jackie, I'll defer to you. Just why don't you take, you're on this now. And
I mean, I don't necessarily have an opinion. That's why I'm asking you. I'm not.
Well, no. So I think we can. I'll go through those as quickly as I can. As I said, hopefully, just connecting to what people are saying now and what they may share. And then we're going to be at the beginning of provider information. As I said, we may just simply get to. Yeah, I mean, I think for sure we're going to lose a lot of that, the details on sharing information, but at the very least, I think we can get to types of information that are important.
I just feel like that section, the sharing information section, feels really important to me, but it is also, but I mean, I'm not saying everything, this is not important. It is all important. But I think, I think it's fine. So whatever, I trust you if you want to go through the next couple slides more quickly than you normally would.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I would have to. But yeah.
Okay. And then in terms of processing this activity, is it okay if I take the lead on processing it and just ask, I'll have like 2 to 3 people share, and then that's it? Maybe 2 people?
All right. And
I'm gonna say is, can I have 2 people share what they talked about in their group, and also maybe 2 people we haven't heard from yet?
Okay. How about the other thing that we could do is I can go through those slides on Dancing with Discord, Rupture and Repair, Applying the Brakes.
Instead of this?
No. What I'm thinking is that I can go through those quickly and then maybe ask them what additional ones, or we can ask them to share what they came up with in their groups, and then just kind of connect that to whatever we're sharing in the next 3 or 4 slides.
Yeah, my only concern is that connecting sometimes takes the same amount of time as presenting. So I just I think it just depends on, I mean, I'm fine with either way. If you are like, I can be efficient about it, great. I just am saying, do you want, so is it okay if I have 2 people share and then we move on, or do you want to do it differently?
That's fine. Let's get a couple of folks to share. Let's give it 5 minutes or less.
I'd say less. It's 12:30. We have 30 minutes left total.
Okay. So how about this? I'll just let you take, whatever, up to 5 minutes or less.
I'm going to try and do it in less. I'm going to try and do it in less. I'm going to try and do it in 2 minutes, 3 minutes maybe, and then I'm going to turn it over to you. Perfect. I think that if you can take no more than 3 minutes to get through the rest of the slides.
Yeah. And a lot of what's a couple of things that are on those slides. So I'll just highlight the ones, and then on the other side of those slides, which are all about, concerns, challenges that can come up. If anyone wants to add anything that kind of came out in their groups that wasn't touched upon, we'll just do a quick check-in on that, and then we'll move into at least the beginning of providing information. We
Yeah.
should be able to do that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So
And how much more time do they have?
they have 30 seconds.
Okay, great. All right. We got this.
Welcome back, everyone.
Shoot. What happened?
Welcome back, everyone.
Oh.
Hey. So we're going to move into processing. I know that probably was not enough time. We're gonna move into just hearing. I'd like to hear from, we have time for about 2 people to share what you all talked about. I'd love to hear from 2 people maybe we haven't heard from yet about what you all shared in your group. Someone willing to share maybe that hasn't spoken yet today?
Hi, so I was part of group 1 and we were talking about when, you know, someone might say, you know, you're the expert, please tell me what to do, kind of thing. And we talked about trying to reframe and give it, you know, back to the family or whoever we are working with, you know, asking them what they've thought about, what pros and cons they've thought, whatever they're discussing, trying to help them understand that they're really the expert in their own life and figure things out, and help them. And we're here to guide them, but not tell them what to do.
That's great.
Yep.
Love that. Love that.
I can go. Hi.
Yeah.
I was in group 3. One of the ones that we talked about is how to handle when we think a client is lying to us. So I used to work in substance use disorders, and that happened all day, every day. So I just kind of talked about how I handled those situations. I would usually start by validating why they might be reticent or fearful about being honest. But at the same time, kind of calling them out on it, and that, you know, I'm here to help, but there's only so much I can do if I don't have the whole picture, if I don't know what's really going on. So that's what we talked about as like a strategy for dealing with that.
Great. I wish we could, those are all really helpful. I really wish that we could take some more time to hear what people talked about in their groups. I hope that they were helpful discussions for you all, but we just want to make sure that we get through today, and you all have been such great, have had such great discussions that we just want to make sure that we, so Jim is gonna go through a couple of different sort of methods for handling sort of some of these different common concerns real quick, and then we'll move on to the next section.
Yeah, and I'm going to go through these really quickly. These are also available in the guide that's part of this, that has a lot of these kind of laid out. But really quick, just the idea of dancing with discord, right? When we feel like we're out of tune with the person that we're working with, and that can come across in a lot of different ways. Lying, someone kind of resisting. So, you know, we just want to sort of, number one is be aware of it. There are signs, right? You might be arguing, they might be interrupting you, you might be interrupting them, there might be ignoring or defensiveness. So just number one is being attuned to that, right? Those can happen. And then resisting the writing reflex, you know, so oftentimes we kind of want to jump in and make things better. And sometimes, you know, what we want to do is, or persuade someone, all of those kinds of things. So these are the kinds of ways discord can come up. And so some of the things we already talked about, using empathic response techniques, but also, you know, what that can also mean is naming it in session. The discomfort that might be coming up. I just said something. It looks like you got uncomfortable, or I just noticed that you kind of, are falling back, or you're reacting to something I said. But just naming it. Promoting autonomy. I think you saw an example of that with Maria. Giving them the choice to share, how much to share, and what to share, or even whether to share. And then suggesting alternatives to meet the other person where they are. If you don't feel so, this is, for example, if someone's not willing to share details about their trauma, but have kind of alluded to trauma, you can give them choice, not necessarily sharing details that they might not be comfortable sharing, and maybe they don't need to share, but could you share with me how you think that has impacted you? How does that affect you or impact you now? And then applying the brakes, again, if someone is sharing too much or getting overwhelmed by the conversations, sort of taking a pause, just simply, it looks like this might be getting upsetting for you. Let's take a break here. Maybe we should stop here. And of course, checking in. How are you feeling? Whenever we're having a conversation that might be hard, you can always, sort of take a break and step back. And or engaging in relaxation or grounding activities. And we're going to do a lot more on that when we talk about regulation, because sometimes it's just an opportunity to step in and do a little relaxation, maybe a deep breath. We'll talk more about that when we talk about some very simple regulation techniques. And then rupture and repair, you feel that, and I think we've had name it in the room, clarify misunderstandings, explain intentions. You saw an example of this when Maria kind of pushed back a little bit on why I was getting in her business, so to speak. But revisit the purpose and the goals of the service. So these are just a few of the things that we kind of summarize as ways of dealing with potential repairs that can happen. This was supposed to be our break, but I know that was kind of quick. I just want to do a quick check-in and then providing information. But if there are a couple more folks that want to share anything else that that you talked about in your groups.
Okay. So what do you suggest to do if someone does overshare? Sorry.
Yeah, I think to go back, and number one is, as just, if I may, just naming it, right? Name the shift in the room, or, one of the things that you can do is, this is a little bit of self-disclosure, like, that's a lot that you're sharing with me. And almost, it is okay to say, I'm almost feeling, I appreciate you sharing and bringing that into the space, and I don't want to ignore it. And I'm wondering if we could just slow down a little bit, because that's a lot. So I think you can name it and then talk a little bit more about how you might put some boundaries on that. So you can always sort of take that step back. And I think we also have here applying the brakes. So it's also okay for you to share your own perspective and say, that's a lot. That's a lot. And we're gonna get into more of that in the time that we work together. But let's take a step back. Thank you for that question, Yana. All right.
So we have about 20 minutes left, so we're going to get started. We've been talking in general about sort of like all sorts of conversations about people's stories, people's past. One thing you might do in the context of those conversations is you might provide people with information. So what kind of information might people, so in terms of, we're going to talk a little bit about what that is like and how we best do that. And I think that this is going to be something that I hope to hear from you. And we're going to talk about it this time, and we're going to probably have to just do a lot of this also in our next session, just for time's sake. But we're going to be talking about what information is most relevant for folks. So what kind of things might you want to provide information to people about? You're going to talk about when is the most appropriate time to introduce different types of information, and then how to do it. So those are the sort of things we're going to be talking about. So what type of information is most useful to people? So there's a lot of different things that you might give people information about, but these are some of the things that we thought about, and then we're going to be sort of thinking about today. You might be, you know, we sometimes call this psychoed, but it's sort of things around trauma that is information that might help people to contextualize their experiences. So that might be signs and symptoms of stress and trauma. It might be a little bit about the neurobiology of stress. You might help them to just make the connection between their past experience and their current symptoms. And you might give them information around social determinants of health. You might give them information about coping or resiliency. What other information do you all find that you are commonly giving to folks in your work? Anything else? Okay. So we're going to now do a brief activity. So if we think about like information on trauma, sort of this kind of psychoeducational information, you might do that in various situations. But so what we're going to think about is what kind of information in different situations would be most helpful to people. So we're going to go through these different, and we're going to do this as a group. And so I'm going to annotate. That's what we're doing here. Okay, so we're going to, let's say there's someone, I would love to hear from people what kind of information you might share in these various situations.
Feeling like there is nothing wrong.
So let's say, we'll start with the first one. Person is expressing feeling like there's something wrong with them. What information might be helpful to somebody in this situation?
What does that look like?
Again, you can unmute, you can use the chat. Okay. It might provide info about trauma symptoms or behavior in order to normalize that. Okay. So Pamela, provide examples. And Deirdre, I'm wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about what you mean by examples. Or anyone else, doesn't have to be Deirdre. Okay, yes. Right, signs and symptoms to see what trauma can look like. Great. Okay. What about, let's go to the next one. Person is sharing feelings of isolation, difficulty connecting to or trusting others. Okay, what might you share with them? How trauma connects our ability to connect with others. Yeah, you might give them information on natural resources or
Feeling unstable to get in touch with patients.
how trauma can impact trust. Yes.
Good.
Great. Okay. Okay. So let's go on to the next one. Person is expressing feeling unable to get in touch with their emotions or feeling numb. Oh, yeah.
Would we suggest medically, like to ensure that they're on top of their medical needs?
So what kind of information would be helpful to someone? Someone tells you, I'm feeling really numb. I don't really know. I just feel like I don't have any feelings. I just feel like I can't get in touch with my feelings. If you're thinking about psychoeducation on trauma or just information about trauma in general, what kind of information might be helpful to them?
And Evelyn, I think your comment makes me think the idea of being numb, right, so sometimes exploring that in terms of just understanding better what they mean by that is critically important because right, numbness could also be a physical trait. So it might be, that importance of helping them make sure that they're taking care of themselves physically. I think here we're referring to like psychological numbness.
Thank you, Jim.
But definitely
I refer them.
clarifying what that's like for them. Yeah.
I would give them some information on developing self-awareness and coming in, getting in touch with their feelings, resources for that.
I would probably talk to them a little bit about how the body keeps the score of everything that happens to us, and the body always seeks to save itself and survive. And sometimes it has to shut down to do that, and that they may have been in survival mode. And that is a coping skill, just getting through. You have to shut it off or it might be too much and overwhelm you.
Brenda's also saying the neurobiology of stress, ruling out physical, then exploring what the body may be protecting itself from.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Great. Okay. Let's do one more. Person is telling that you about how they have difficulty following rules or dealing with authority. What information? So what information would be helpful to this person?
Well, who they feel is in authority, who they view as in authority.
So that's something you would explore with them? Yeah. And then once you've explored sort of what authority looks like to them, what information might be helpful to them? Okay, yeah. Making that connection between their past and current symptoms. So maybe helping them to see the way that to help them provide information about, sometimes the way that we've been experienced authority in the past can affect us in the present. Yeah.
Probably talk to them about a healthy desire for control and autonomy and independence. And they're striving for that and how that can impact authority relationships.
I think this is a really good one, especially for parents in education, because you see so much like PDA recently, pervasive demand avoidance, and really thinking about ways that you can reframe a request so that there's collaboration. And so having skill there, I think, is also really helpful.
Yeah, right. That, just because somebody is, sometimes a kid that is like, when you talk about like pathological demand avoidance, what is that about? right? And helping them to make that connection that this isn't just a bad kid or a kid that is just trying to cause problems or trying to be difficult to parent. It's also about things around control, right? How is that kid getting control in their life?
See, I think also when she said PDA, I thought personal displays of affection. So I think communication,
second, too.
because initials mean very different things to different people.
Took me a second too, for sure. For
Sorry
sure.
about that.
And yeah. And Deborah, one of the things that you said made me think too that, being able to have a conversation and information about the child development, right? Especially if it's a young person, right? Child development, but I think Jennifer, as you were saying, with parents as well, right? Some of this is just normal child development, rebelliousness, independence, the need for autonomy among young people, and it's an opportunity to explore though whether trauma was also at play, and what is trauma related and what is just part of normal child development, and that's a great discussion to be able to have.
So well said, and thank you for mentioning that.
Oh, no, just reinforcing what you said. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think sometimes also, we think about this with little kids, but also with teenagers, right? What is normal teenage behavior, right? Sometimes thinking about this for older kids as well. So I'm aware of the time, and I want to make sure we have time for, so thank you all so much. We may come back to this in our next session because I feel like this is important. But
So, Jackie, just really quick, I'm sorry, okay. So really quick, in your guide, you can take a look at it, but in your guide, we have a whole section on providing information. So just a few things that are here that we can talk a little bit more about next week, but we actually have some scripts in there on things like how to explain ACEs, or how you might talk about ACEs in a very simple way, or a few other terms that are here, the window of tolerance. You all mentioned connecting the dots between their experiences in the present and their experiences of the past. So we can kind of do a little bit review next week, the window of tolerance, the hand model of the brain, and just explaining resilience. So we'll go over that a little bit more next week. And the how to provide information. But with that said, we also want to make sure that we have time to, close out the session, and we'll pick up here next week.
Hi, Jim. Is it possible that you can share the PowerPoints for this session and the previous session before the next session? Because there seems to be a whole lot of information that that I would really love to take a look at, before we finish.
so the slides, the PowerPoints for these two sessions, and I'll have to, this first session should definitely be on the website. I will double check about the second sessions, just because as we said before, Leslie, who was here last week, is away this week. But they will all be on the website. Are you asking for the third session also in advance?
Oh, if you could, but yeah, but
definitely the first
previous
two.
ones. Yeah, yeah.
We'll
yes.
definitely have them be on the website. And I'll double check. They may be there now, but if they're not, I will double check on that.
Yeah.
Great.
And
Thank
just
you.
to reiterate, a lot of what we're covering here is covered in the guide as well, so you can take a look at that, but it'll all be available there.
Great. Thank you.
Vanessa also really quickly put
Wait, one, and I'm still on a trainee.
the survey to the
Right.
feedback survey
Thanks, Jen.
in the slides, in the chat. Please complete that survey. We do look at and read the survey, so please give us any feedback. I just wanted to just ask folks to open that up and get started. And just really quick, if you have a moment, we'd like to give you the time to complete that survey. And if you can also just throw in the chat on your way out as we're checking out today, something based on today's discussion, something that you're going to keep doing, maybe something that we talked about reinforced, something that you already do, but you want to keep doing, something that you want to start doing, right? It might be something that you learned today that you see as a different, that you want to put in your toolbox, that you want to start doing. And Anything that you want to stop doing, not stop doing, stop doing. Stop doing. And anything that kind of triggered you to think, okay, I need to do something different in the way I approach the work. So just those two things. We're gonna sort of keep the Zoom obviously going. So please complete the survey, and please feel free to, on your way out, chat in one of these things that we're bringing up. Jackie, anything else I'm missing?
Well, thank you all so much. I know it was sort of a speed rush at the end, but we really appreciate all of you and your participation. We're really looking forward to seeing you all for our last session. And yeah, and if there's anything you need between now and then, I know that some of you found out that, you know, Leslie was away this week because you got an automated email from her. But also, I believe on, if you want all, I think it's, hold on. Oop. I believe Jim, your this is also Jim's email, not to volunteer Jim for responding to more emails, but if for some reason also you need to get in touch with us between now and the next session, you can reach out. Leslie will also be back for our last session. Yeah, we'll be looking forward to seeing everyone and hearing from you.
Thank you. So we're going to keep it open. Please complete the survey. While you're doing that, I just want to pull a couple of things out on the chat. Ayana, I would like to have a role play for sharing information based on those scenarios. Ayana, yeah, we have a couple of demonstrations as well. So we're going to share that for you next week.
And hopefully we'll have time for, we do have a role play. We were hoping to get to one today. So we'll see if we can make time for it for next time.
Yep, absolutely. Susan says, keep finding strengths even when the client doesn't think they are there. Great. Deidre says, keep focusing on strengths and offer support and education. Keep doing, be curious, start doing, Jureen says, be curious, start doing, being more mindful and rupture and repair, and train my team on recognizing it. Thank you, Jureen. And Mikael says, keep looking for the strengths in my clients. Absolutely. The importance of validation. Keep providing education to clients when appropriate. Start grounding, pausing things when they spiral. And the grounding and pausing things, Danielle says that. The grounding and pausing, again, next week, we're going to talk a little bit about some simple regulation strategies that you can use. And then stop avoiding my feelings, reactions during sessions. That's awesome, Danielle. Yes, stop avoiding my feelings and reactions during sessions. So yeah, use it. Be aware of it. Stay connected to what's coming up for you. Keep validating. And then thank yous. Those were wonderful reflections on today.
Thank you all so much.
And we'll close promptly at 1, but thank you all. And again, please give us that feedback, and we will see you all next week.